All right, look at verse 1 in 2 Timothy chapter 4. It says, I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing in his kingdom. Preach the word, be instant, in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. Okay, so right here we see something very specific that the Bible says is going to come. There's going to be a time when people are not going to be able to endure the sound doctrine. They're going to be turned unto fables, and these fables and things that they come up with, they are designed to fulfill their own lusts, what these people want and what these people desire. And the title of my message tonight, it's going to sound stupid. It's going to sound like this is a completely unedifying message. Why would you even preach something like this? There's actually very many good reasons for this. I'm going to be preaching this. And that is ancient aliens in light of the Bible. All right, ancient aliens. Has anybody in here, you go ahead and admit it, have you seen the History Channel's Ancient Aliens thing? All right, I watched some of that, it's kind of cool. How did they build the pyramids? How did they move those big rocks and make them fit just perfect? How did they do all that stuff? And let me tell you, there's plenty of things that we can look at, and just think, how in the world did they do it? And we don't know. I mean, we really don't know how that worked. We don't know how they did it. I don't know how they did Stonehenge. I mean, I saw a program one time. I don't know how accurate this stuff is, but supposedly those stones came from like 200 miles away. How did they haul them big stones that far? How did they do these things? Now, here's the thing. When it comes to stuff like this, I don't have a problem with people speculating on certain things. But folks, when the Bible is silent on something, we should be silent on that thing. We shouldn't be teaching a doctrine, but what's happening is people are taking these unknowns that are out there, and they're coming up with theories based on their own lust, all right? And then they're making doctrines out of them. And this particular subject, to this ancient aliens thing, I have had so many people bring this up to me. When we were doing the Bible studies out at the high rise, it kept coming up by different people. Have you seen the ancient aliens thing? I personally think that the way we got here is, some alien, planted a seed or, put people here. Aliens put man here. And just weird things like that. And it kept coming up. And I'm like, I didn't even know what it was at the time. And everybody kept talking about, I've had people bring it up when I've been out souling before. I've had coworkers bring this up. So obviously, that ancient aliens thing, it made an impact on people. But I'm going to show you that, there's a reason. There's a reason for this. There is a reason. And the thing is, some of the stupidity that's being pushed in that, it has made it into Baptist churches. And I'm going to show you from the Bible how I believe we ought to answer some of these stupid things that people come up with. Because, how do we explain? All right? And I've had people ask me, how do you explain the evidence of all the alien encounters? How do we explain the positive proof of flying saucers based on a drawing in a cave? Because that's what people portray it as. Sluter made a video talking about, aliens and things like that, and he was talking about, the paintings in caves and these, artifacts they found, shaped like flying saucers, like, it's like where I come from, that's a little too much smoke for there not to be a fire, is what he said. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, a cave painting is now proof. Okay, yeah, maybe it does look like a flying saucer in there. Maybe there is something on the hieroglyphics that looks like a spaceship or an alien, or maybe, they found those one carvings of those like golden things that look like some kind of airplane or something, proving that they had flying machines back in those days. And and I'm watching this program, and I'm thinking, there's like so many of their conclusions they came to are based off of false assumptions that people have about 5,000 years ago. And so I want to look at what the Bible says about some of these things, and just show how I believe these things ought to be answered. Because I think if we're not careful, you can really get caught up into some stupidity, retardation, whatever you want to call it. And we want to avoid this kind of thing. But what I want to do in this message, I want to explain all the so-called proofs that are out there, and then I want to explain why there's such an obsession with this subject. And so, what does all this so-called proof actually prove? All right, they found artifacts that look like flying machines. They found paintings on caves of flying saucers and things like that. What does that prove? Okay, here's what I believe it proves. I believe it proves that man has always had an imagination and loved to tell stories. I mean, have you ever thought about, think about this for a minute, all right? If a painting on a cave is proof of flying saucers, okay, well, what if something like, theoretically, I know it's not going to happen because it wouldn't fit Bible prophecy, but what if something apocalyptic happened on this earth where most of civilization died, all right, and everything was destroyed, and then, hundreds of years later, they uncovered some vault with a bunch of DVDs and a DVD player and a television. And they started watching these things. Do you know what they would probably, if they were as dumb as we are, you know what they would think? They would think that guys back in this day, wore tights and capes and could fly, shoot fire from their eyes. Think about that. They'd have, guys dressed up like bats and fought crime and, used cool gadgets and things like that. That's exactly what they would think. But you and I are like, no, those are just stories. That's just fantasy. That's made up. They would think that there was a time when there was hobbits and wizards and, elves and, gremlins and all these things. Like they would think there was all these alien encounters. That's exactly what they would think, wouldn't it? But it's like, for some reason, we think that imagination started when Hollywood got started. Somehow we think that fantasy started in the last century. All right? Why? Why couldn't they have made up stories back then? Why couldn't they, we've got stories about time machines, and spaceships that can take you to other galaxies in just a matter of short time. Why couldn't they have told stories about flying machines back in those days? They might have understood a little bit about aerodynamics. They might have been able to make a paper airplane or a car, or something like that could fly a little bit. They might have understood a little bit about aerodynamics. There might have been some smart people that are like, if we can get an object that was shaped like this at this weight to move it at a high enough speed, this thing would potentially fly. They could have, done stuff like that. But what do? We just assume that nobody had imagination back in those days. But we see in the Bible, they told fables. We see in the Bible, they told stories. And it was prophesied that they would be turned to fables. Let's look at a few more verses. It says in 1 Timothy 1:3, it says, "As I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus, when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine, neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions rather than godly edifying, which is in faith, so do." Okay? Fables. They told fables back then. People got caught up in that stuff. They would tell their stories of their gods. And you've got these people today that think that at one time that there was, half men, half fish, because they've, got these statues from way back in the old days. Why couldn't they have made up something like that back then? Why is it that it's amazing when you talk to these people, I'll ask them these questions. Do you think fantasy started with Disney? No, it didn't start with Disney. They've just gotten really good at it and made it look more real. But people have written about fantasy since the beginning of time. They have made up stories. They have had their own superheroes. You know what they were called? Gods. That's what they were. They were these gods that they made up. These were made up stories. And these things would get passed down, maybe to the point where people thought they were real. People thought that it really happened and actually did believe in them. But it was just storytelling. Mankind has always loved a good story. It says in chapter 4, verse 6, 1 Timothy, "If thou put the brethren in remembrance of these things, that thou shalt be a good minister of Jesus Christ, nourished up in the words of faith and of good doctrine, whereunto thou hast attained, but refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness." And a wife's, what's an old wives' fable, And most people think it's similar to like an old wives' tale. And what's an old wives' tale? It's really just some kind of thing or a superstition that's just kind of been passed down. Okay? For example, I was reading some different wives' fables, and one of them was, cracking your knuckles will cause arthritis. Apparently that's a wives' tale. I just found that out. I thought that was real, all right? Because I heard that my whole life. I heard people say that, and it's amazing how many things have just been repeated over the years. Like, for example, everybody thinks, hate the sin, love the sinners in the Bible, even though it's not. What do they call that? Whenever they find out something's not in the Bible that they're sure was a Bible, today we call it the Mandela effect. I was like, no, it's just mass stupidity being spread is what it is. All right? It's not anything like that. We just hear these things so many times. We think, the lion lying down with the lamb. I was shocked when I found out that wasn't in the Bible. That has gotten in our heads so much. In Branson, at the Sights and Sound Theater that does all these Christian plays, they got a great big statue outside the place of a lion lying down with a lamb. And that's not even in the Bible. But everybody thinks it's a wolf. People are like, what, a wolf? Something happened. I know it was lying. I know it said that in the Bible somewhere. And I could swear, too, I remember hearing that on a movie, on an Alvin York movie. I haven't watched it since I found out about the Mandela effect. I'm pretty sure there's a scene in that movie where a guy was reading it and he read something about a lion lying down with a lamb. I need to go find that movie and go back and watch it. And if it got changed, then I'm going to believe the Mandela effect. But no, it's just, he might have said lying down with a lamb. Maybe that was going around back then. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. But you know what? There are stories or superstitions that have just been passed down. And there's things that people have just believed because they've just heard these stories and they don't know if it's true or not. And some people think it is, but we're supposed to avoid those things. And there's a lot. And what people do too, they'll look and they'll find some evidence. They'll find an old book that refer to. They'll find a carving in a cave or something like that, and they just all of a sudden it's just automatic proof. All of a sudden, it's just foolish. It just proves they've always had imaginations. Man's always liked a good story. It proves too they had fake news back then. We think fake news started with CNN. No, fake news has always been around. Propaganda has always been around. Turn over to Matthew chapter 28. And this is the thing too. We've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. 4 perfectly preserved, perfectly harmonious books of the Bible that agree together in a way that is supernatural. They agree together in a way that man could never make happen. Only God could make that happen. Yet they can go and dig up a gospel of Thomas, a gospel of Judas, and that proves that, Jesus didn't really die on the cross, that he just went into a coma. Or that proves, who wrote the Da Vinci Code. A modern day person could write a book, and all of a sudden that proves that Jesus married Mary Magdalene. And you know what? If 100 years passed and something apocalyptic happened, somebody would find that book and say that was proof. Because somebody made up a story about it. You've got these other so-called extra-biblical books, the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch, and because they have stories that line up with the Bible, people say, well, that's proof that Abraham got thrown into a fiery furnace too. Yeah, there's a story about Abraham getting thrown into a fiery furnace. It proves that the reason Moses had a speech impediment was because when he was a baby, he had wisdom that was far beyond other children. And the wise men figured out that he was this deliverer God promised, and they were going to kill him. And so they were going to prove that he was just like any other kid. And they had 2 rocks on a tray that they brought to Moses. And one was a glowing hot coal that, an ordinary little kid would go for the glowing thing, right? But a wise child above their, years would know not to do that and go for the rock. And so Moses, he went to go for the rock, being the wise child that he was, but an angel made him go for the hot coal that he grabbed and put to his mouth and burn it. And that's why he was slow of speech. Y'all didn't know that, did you? Now, that's a great story, but you know what it is? It's a fable. And folks, I've got a bunch of those too. All right? I've got a bunch of fables. I've read those books. I could tell you about how Satan continued harassing Eve after they left the Garden of Eden, and all that kind of stuff. These are made up stories, is what they are. They're made up. They're just based on some of them. Well, they don't contradict the Bible. Okay, just like Smallville didn't really contradict Superman, all right? Superman comic books, that's like the canon, right? And everybody knows Superman gets with Lois Lane, works in Metropolis, all that kind of stuff. So what did they do? Later, somebody comes along, they make up a story. Let's make up a story about his teenage years, And so we can pretty much do whatever we want, but, we can't kill off Lois Lane. We can't, certain things have to happen to fit the rest of the story, right? We all get that all of that's fake, but we don't think somebody could have made up stories like that back in the Bible days to fit with the rest of the Bible. For some, it's like we think all this artistic, license stuff happened, in the last century. It's always been around. And these things don't prove anything. The book of Enoch proves nothing. The book of Jasher proves nothing. All these things, they are just stories. They were probably entertainment. It's fables, and there's a danger of getting caught up into those things. And these things, they appeal to one's own lust. But look what it says in Matthew chapter 28 and verse 11. It says, "Now when they were going, behold, some of the watch came into the city and showed unto the chief priest all these things that were done. And when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, Say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while he slept. And if this come to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. So they took the money and did as they were taught. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day." Y'all see that? Fake news. This is where CNN got started. All right? This is, or MSNBC, this is how they got their beginning. What happened? They didn't like what really happened, so they made up a story and they went and they reported it. Now, this probably isn't going to happen, but you know what? Let's just say, all right, and I know that they did things different back then, but what if somebody, went in an archaeological dig, found a cave that had a well-preserved newspaper from back in Jesus' day that told the whole story about how the disciples stole the body of Jesus. And it even said in there, too, that one of them admitted it. Bartholomew admits that they stole the body of Jesus, that the resurrection was a hoax. Well, the Bible doesn't really say much about Bartholomew, does it? Man, that proves it right there. There's a newspaper that they dug up. It's 2,000 years old, so it has to be true. Listen, if they found something like that, you know what that would prove? It would prove the Bible's right again. Because the Bible says they made up a story back then. And people made up stories back in those days. And it's like people forget that. I'll bet there were some counterfeit gospels back then. I mean, the Gospel of Judas, it might be, or a Gospel of Thomas, those might be books written from 2,000 years ago, but you know what? $5 says they weren't written by Thomas. They definitely weren't written by Judas. All right? He was too busy being dead. There was no way it was by those guys, but there might have been legitimate books from back then, probably put together by the Jews to try to deceive the Christians. But people will find those things, and all of a sudden it's proof. They'll find a carving on a rock. I remember when we went to Israel, it was a copy of it. They didn't have the real one there. One of the places we were visiting, in an archaeological dig not that many years ago, or it was like in the last 100 years, they had found a carving on a rock with the name of Pontius Pilate. And then they said that all of a sudden we finally have proof that Pontius Pilate actually existed. Because before they found that carving on the rock, there was no proof that Pontius Pilate ever existed. And I remember I'm thinking, how were the Gospels not proof that Pontius Pilate existed? Here we have writings that have been well preserved and that have been being used since the time of Christ, but these things aren't proof, but some rock that you dug up that has his name on it, that's proof. That's a standard of proof for you, but this isn't. Something that, there is evidence that every cult, Christianity has been around somewhere in this world since the time of Christ, using the scriptures, and yet these books aren't proof, but a carving on a rock is proof. Do you all see the foolishness of this thinking? Yet they'll show that on this History Channel, And then they find, we discovered this, we discovered this carving on a wall in Egyptian, this hieroglyphic, and we interpret it to mean whatever. And guess what? It contradicts the Bible. And we just proved that the Bible's false. No, you just proved there was fake news even back on that day. In fact, just like the Bible says. Because the Bible says that kind of thing went on. This it's just foolishness that these people are using just because they want to believe anything but the Bible. Propaganda did not start in the 20th century. I mean, actually, and really when you stop and think about it, all right, don't take this the wrong way, because the Bible's full of lies. It is. The sons of Jacob lied about Joseph, didn't they? The Potiphar's wife lied about Joseph. The false prophets, they prophesied lies. They taught about false gods. The Jews lied about Jesus. It might be very possible that you could find some rock, some carving, something dating back to the time of Christ that portrays Jesus as some bad guy, as some liar, as somebody who was a fraud. And you know what? To me, it would make perfect sense if we found something like that, because people were lying about him back in Jesus' day. But yet today, they'll find these things, they'll dig something up, hey, this could be interpreted this way, and all of a sudden it's positive proof for whatever they want to think, yet the Word of God is not proof. And not even the Word of God. All right? Just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay? Books that have been being used for the last 2,000 years. Nobody even thinks these things surfaced in 1611. Okay? I mean, we've got even the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Isaiah Scrolls, that, prophesy Jesus Christ so clearly. Those things are even old, date back before the time of Christ. But yet those things aren't proof. Those aren't proof of, that the Word of God is legit. No, because people, they pay attention to the evidence they want. They go along with the evidence that fits their own lust. And that is what they do on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, all these documentaries and things. They just go along with what they want. And so understanding all this, it ought to cause us to understand it's very likely that people could uncover evidence that tells a very clear story that goes against what the Scripture teaches. It makes perfect sense because they were lying about these things back in Jesus' day. And so it just multiple accounts of the resurrection of Christ, miraculously preserved, used in every generation for 2,000 years, but they're not historical proof of the resurrection. Okay? That's just them picking and choosing. But you know what? They could go find a carving, they can find a picture on an Egyptian wall that looks like one of their, that they're like doing a brain surgery on somebody, and that proves that the Egyptians knew how to do brain surgery. First off, are you sure that's what that's actually interpreting? Second of all, maybe it just proves they had imagination back then. Are you sure that's not a carving showing their mummification process too, how they would take all the organs out of people? But no, because on this one carving, the guy, is laying there dead, and the next carving, they're doing some kind of surgery on him. Next one, that guy's alive. Okay, maybe they told stories about raising people from the dead then too. Do you think stories like Dracula and Frankenstein and all these things just started in the 1800s? No, they told stories back in those days too. Job knew about the resurrection of the dead that was going to come one of these days. Way back in his day, there's probably other cultures that heard about a resurrection and they came up with their own versions of it. These things don't prove anything. But yet today, our gullible world that's just willing to accept anything, as long as it contradicts the Bible, they go along with it like it's proof. And even so-called Bible believers, they got a drawing on a wall, looks like a flying saucer. That proves, that there were, flying saucers at one day. It's just, it's ridiculous, and it blows my mind that people even think that way. So why is there such a growing obsession of this thing? Because remember, the Bible says these fables that they're turning to, they're based on their own lusts. Okay? I can see why people came up with the idea of Superman. Who wouldn't like to be able to fly and be bulletproof? and all the cool superpowers that Superman has. All right, who wouldn't like to be Spider-Man and all that kind of, I wish I had some of those skills. Every time I watch, see those things, I'm like, I need to get me a Spider-Man suit. I need to get me one of those things that can shoot webs out and all that. I don't know what I'd do with it, but it'd be pretty cool. People. Why is there such a growing obsession for these stuff? It's because man loves entertainment. Look what it says in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Hey, we think entertainment started, once again, we think it all started in the last century. Mankind has always loved entertainment. Now, in previous history, in previous cultures, man has always been too poor, too busy, spending too much time trying to survive, to have a lot of time for, playing around and for entertainment. But we do see in more prosperous times, in more prosperous cultures, that they did in fact have a lot of entertainment. And we see Solomon, one of the most richest kings there ever was, during one of the most prosperous time there ever was, one of the things that he went to in trying to find joy, he tried everything. And one of the things that he tried then, that we are still trying today in our very rich country, so rich that it's real easy for people to be lazy. It says in verse 1, it says, I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is madness of mirth. What doeth it? Jump down to verse 8. It says, I gathered me also silver and gold, the peculiar treasure of the kings and of the provinces. I gat me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. Okay? Now, obviously, they didn't have movies then. They didn't have computer animation. They didn't have cartoons. But you know what? They had singers. They had instruments. They had music. And Solomon, he's trying to find happiness. So what does he do? He tries to surround himself with mirth and pleasure and with entertainment, thinking this is something that's going to bring me happiness. And you know what? Solomon, I think one of the reasons he got so into this, he got rich, he got prosperous, and then he got bored. And he needed entertained. And that's where we are today. That's why they're making so many movies. That's why they spend billions of dollars on movies. Why? Because people are desperate for entertainment. They can't get enough. That's why people are so amazed at just the technology and how cool things look. There's a market for that stuff. There was a day when The Wizard of Oz was cool because of the fact that it went from black and white to color in one movie. And all the cool special effects they had on there. But that were actually dangerous. When the Wicked Witch disappeared in that cloud of smoke, there was a trap door and she got hurt when that thing dropped. We've all seen the things with that. The Wizard of Oz. People used to think that was cool. Now we're like, that's lame. Now they've just got all this computer animation that's just nuts, and it's good. We're obsessed with that. Man loves sci-fi and fantasy. Look what it says in Acts chapter 17 and verse 18. Because I've heard people too, they'll bring up stuff about the Greek gods. And that's like proof. That's like proof that there were these, and Christian people, they'll call them like demons and things like that. You know what I think they were? I think they were, not, most of them were probably just nothing. There might have been some demonic stuff there. But folks, the Greek gods, that just proves once again, they had superstition and imagination back then too. In fact, a lot of those Greek gods are very similar to a lot of our superheroes of today. Why? Because man's just always been fascinated with that stuff. In Acts chapter 17, verse 18, says, Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, What will this babbler say? Others, some he seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is. Can you please introduce the next superhero? All right. Look, they didn't ask him for any proof. You know why? Because they didn't have any proof for all those other gods that they served. No, hey, you got a new hero? All right, cool. What's his superpower? All right, tell us about this new God. All right. It says, For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We would know, therefore, what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. They didn't have a movie theater back then, but you know what they did have? They did have a place where people can get together and tell stories. Hey, somebody come tell a story. And you know what? Back then, there were probably some master storytellers that had an imagination like people do today, that come up with really, just really cool ideas, and they'd sit there and they'd just kind of go into another world. Tell us about these things. And they did. These people would go there just to hear new stories. And in this place, too, where they loved to hear new stories, guess what they had? They had all these altars to all these different gods. And yet today, people will look at that and say, oh, that was proof that there was, something back then. No, there was nothing. There was people with an imagination. That's what there was. And maybe in some of these cultures that lived a really long time, as these stories were passed down, they might have become more and more real, over the generations. But the truth is, nobody ever saw any proof of them. And in this case here, they weren't even looking for proof of this new God. Let's hear about him. All right? We got plenty of room to put up some more superhero figures. Tell us what he looks like. And then Paul goes and he tells them, and preaches to them. They had one thing there for the unknown God. And I don't know for sure what that was all about in their minds, but he ends up preaching on Jesus. Let's read a little more of this. Verse 24 says, God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. You know what he's saying here? He's like, this God, he's the creator of everything. He's the one that made everything that's in this world is from this one God. Okay? He's made us all of one blood. You know what he's doing here? He's making sure these people understand, hey, this isn't just my God. I don't have my God, you have your God. No, this is the one God of all gods. Okay? I'm not here today to just tell you another story so you can add another volume to your comic book collection, so you can add another figurine to your little statue collection that you have. This God I'm telling you about is the one true God. He says that they that should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him, and find him, though be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. He is why you exist. As certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by art and man's devices. He's not like these other gods that you all came up with, that you made up, Stan Lee, that you made up. I don't know who did Superman. I don't know, whoever, He made this God that we're talking about. He's the one that made you. You made the superheroes. You came up with Iron Man. You came up with all these people. But you came up with Zeus and Apollo and all these people. You made those gods. This God that I'm talking about, he made you. That's what Paul's saying right there. And so in verse 30, he says, and at the time of this ignorance, God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent. Hey, it's time to grow up, people. It's time to get out of your fantasy worlds. It's time to stop worshiping your made-up gods. There's a real God. There's one true God that you're going to stand before one of these days, and you better get ready. He's commanded all men everywhere to repent. You need to forsake these idols. You need to stop serving these things. They're nothing. They're statues. They have no power. They never were anything. Okay? There is not a Hades that's some demon that's out there, and a Thor and a Zeus and these were made up by people. They were made up, not based on any reality at all. And so so the reason this thing is so big, okay, man's obsessed with this stuff. Man loves a good story. It fulfills the lust of the flesh. But then another reason it's so big right now, it's the same reason it was big back then. You know why? Because there's false prophets who understand that there is a market for this stuff. And folks, in the Baptist world, and not even in the Baptist world, I don't know of another religion in the world that tries to incorporate every sci-fi fantasy thing. I don't know of any other religion like that tries to incorporate every fantasy out there and make it fit the Bible other than Baptist. Baptists are the ones that do that. They try to make every sci-fi fantasy movie fit the Bible. When I say Baptist, I'm referring to the Ruckmanite Baptist. Okay, they just came out with a movie here last year called Megalodon. Gene Kim teaches, he's got a video on there about how Jonah was swallowed, not by a whale like Jesus said. I know it says great fish in Jonah. People are like, well, we don't know it was a whale. No, Jesus said it was a whale. Okay, Jesus said it was a whale. It was a whale. He says it was a megalodon. What does that mean? What's a megalodon? I'll tell you what it is. It's an interdimensional creature that can swim from the ocean to hell. Yeah, that's what he's teaching. Okay, now why would you do that? I'll tell you why. Because we have a society today and a culture that's obsessed with megalodons now. And so you got Gene Kim wanting to get a following, wanting people to listen to him. Oh yeah, I believe in megalodons. They're in the Bible too. Yep, absolutely. You've got Peacock, I don't know what his first name is, down in Jacksonville, who preaches about centaurs and half men, half goats. Yes. Teaches in a triangle-shaped universe that was filled with water at one time. All this crazy sci-fi. He teaches that, a unicorn, it's a horse, that has a horn come out of his head. Trying to make all the little My Little Pony girls happy. And the bronies happy. Every sci-fi thing that is out there today, there are Ruckmanites that have incorporated that with the Bible. You've got Sluter with this thing, talking about aliens. In that video, what does he do? He talks about the sons of God, how they came down. He kept saying how the sons of God came down. He said in the video, it says in Genesis chapter 6 that they came down. Go read Genesis chapter 6 and see if it says the sons of God came down. It does not say that they came down. But what does he do? They try to make that doctrine fit, this half man, half man, half God type thing. It makes it fit Greek mythology. It makes it fit the superhero stories, so that's why mermaids came from, and all these just crazy, whacked out theories. Why? Because people love that stuff. They make it sound like the pre-flood world sounds like Lord of the Rings. That's what they make it sound like, and people love that. And so they get, it's a way they get a following. It's a way they get people to listen to them, and they turn them to fables instead of just teaching the plain, simple, teachings of the Bible. Well, we don't know what all happened before the flood. Well, I know, Frodo wasn't trying to throw the ring into the lava, Mordor or whatever. I know it's nothing like that, but these guys want to make it all. Every sci-fi thing that's out there, aliens, flying saucers, Ruckmanites teach it, and they incorporate it with the Bible. And it's just whacked out fantasy stuff. There was no Hercules, all right? There was no Zeus. There were none of these things. These stories about false gods, I don't even think many of them are necessarily demonic. I think they're made up. I think they're no different than DC and Marvel. I think they're no different than Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, all that. There's no difference. But you know what? People today, they will accept anything that denies the one true God. Look at what it says in 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2. So, well, what about Stonehenge? What about the pyramids? Listen, here's what I can tell you based on the Bible. Before the flood, they were living 900 years. You know what? If you're living 900 years, obviously, you mean our brains the way they are right now wouldn't last 900 years. There's people today who, their bodies are pretty healthy physically, but they lose their minds. Okay? Obviously, things were different. Man was smarter before the flood. If you watch all those things, when they were talking about the flying machines and stuff, they were talking about how they could have maybe catapulted it and got it flying a little bit or something like that. And I'm not saying they had airplanes and stuff before the flood. I'm not saying that. But I will say they were really smart before the flood. Noah built that ark that was pretty impressive. They did build the pyramids. They built some pretty amazing things. You live 900 years, you're going to be able to learn a few things. Okay? The world was all of one language and one speech. I think here, but when you watch these ancient alien things, they're like, well, we know they barely invented the wheel at this point. So it must be, no, you don't know that. You don't know that at all. See, they deny a flood. They deny a world where people lived over 900 years like the Bible teaches. So you see, their assumptions they're always coming up with are always false. Now listen, because the Bible doesn't tell us about the technology that they had back then, you know what? I don't get to make up cool sci-fi stories about how it was before the flood. And I definitely don't get to try to incorporate, sci-fi stories from today with the Bible just because there's a market for it. That's wrong. You know what I just have to say when it comes to the pyramids? I don't know how they built them. I don't know how they moved those rocks on Stonehenge. I just know they were obviously smarter than we think back then. And that's the end of it. That doesn't mean, that doesn't give credibility to the Greek god stories. It doesn't give credit to all those things. No, man's always had an imagination. Those things, they don't fit together at all. 2 Peter chapter 2, and notice what it says. It says in verse 1, but there were false prophets also among the people, this is referring back in the Old Testament, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of, and through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. They're making merchandise. Okay, folks, this is the world we live in today. All right, there is a reason guys like Sam Gipp get the meetings that he does. He tells stories about zombies. He tells about a coming zombie apocalypse. 40 days before the rapture, the dead are going to rise from the dead. That's why, we're allowed to like vampires and all these other things. But you know what? We never like zombies. What are they always doing on movies with zombies? They're always shooting them in the face with a shotgun. Do you know there's zombie slayer bullets? That's what he said. You can buy zombie slayer bullets. Why are they doing that? So when the dead in Christ rise, we'll all start shooting them. Which it's not going to work because they're coming up in the same body that Jesus came up in. Why would you tell a story like that in church? It's not based on the Bible at all. I mean, it doesn't even come close. There's nothing in the Bible that even resembles that says they're coming up 40. That is just beyond stupidity. But why would he preach that? I'll tell you why. Because there is a market for zombie stories. If you don't believe me, just turn on television and there's going to be a zombie show on. Go to Walmart and see how many different zombie movies you find in the DVD section. There's a market for that. So you know what Sam Gipp's doing? He's trying to tap into that market. He knows the people in these churches that he's going to are watching The Walking Dead and the Night of the Living Dead and all those. He knows they're watching all that stuff. And you know what? People eat it up. People eat up. When he was at Providence Baptist College, they get a chance to ask him questions. One of the first questions he got asked by one of the college students. Hey, can you tell us about the dead in Christ rising first? They obviously heard him talk about that. They wanted to hear about that. Hey, tell us a story about zombies. We're bored with the Bible here. Tell us a story about zombies. And so what does he do? He tells them a story about zombies. He did his same routine that he does in the video that's out there. And listen, we need to learn to see through this stuff. And I don't have time to go through the rest of 2 Peter, but basically, if you read the rest of 2 Peter, it's just warning what God is going to do with these false prophets. God's going to destroy them. He's going to kill them. They're leading people away from the simple truths of the Bible. Why? So they can just fulfill the lust of their mind with just fantasy. And you say, it's not that bad. Folks, we live in a world of live action role playing. And one of the I said I wanted to preach this because I want y'all to know how to answer this. But you know what? I try to avoid doing clickbait titles. But you know what? I did the clickbait title for this one, and I'm going to tell you why I did the clickbait title. It's for all the losers that are going to watch this video just because of the title. Not the people who normally watch my preaching. All right? This one will probably get more views than most of my other sermons. You know why? Because there's a bunch of and this is for the people watching online that don't normally watch my preaching. All right? If you normally watch my preaching, I'm not picking on you. All right? This is for the people who don't normally watch my preaching. You know why you're watching this right now? Because you're a loser. You're a loser. When you get done, you're probably going to go watch Lord of the Rings or some sci-fi movie. You probably go to Comic-Con and you dress up like a superhero. You go to these Lord of the Ring conventions and you dress up like a hobbit or a wizard. You probably play those magic card games and you cast spells on people and stuff. You live in your mom's basement. You're a loser. You can't get a job. You can't get a wife. And you know what? You need to get out of this fantasy world, and it's time to grow up and start getting into the real truths of the Bible, because you're being led astray by this stuff. I don't like this. Doesn't feel good. Well, then go watch your sci-fi shows. Go watch a time travel movie and pretend you can go back in time and never watch this movie where you're this service where you got your feelings hurt. It's just, these people are ridiculous. And they're grown men. We watched a video this afternoon. Somebody shared on Facebook. Some guy, it was him reacting to the new Star Wars trailer. It's this effeminate dude. He's watching this and he's just geeking out. He starts crying. It wasn't even very cool. And he starts crying and he's just so excited. He looked like he's about to wet his pants. And then at the end, all of a sudden you hear the voice of Emperor Palpatine. He's like spazzing out. Guys like that ought to get the snot beat out of them. That is pathetic. And yet, you say there's not that much out there. You watch when that Star Wars comes out. There's going to be people standing in line. There's a guy that lives here in town I worked with back when Episode 3 came out. He was so excited when Episode 3 came out. He couldn't wait. This guy, his license plate was Jedi. He wore this big brown sweatshirt. He didn't wear like the full tunic and stuff, but had the big hood. He'd walk around on it with the hood over his head like a Jedi. He was so excited it came out. He went and he got tickets for 2 showings of that. He watched it twice the day it came out. And he stood in line, watched it twice the day it came out. People today are obsessed with fantasy, and there's preachers today that are trying to make the modern day fantasies fit the Bible. And you know what? I was watching a random live stream of a Sunday school lesson today. I haven't went back and watched it yet. This preacher, he's got to be a Ruckmanite. I'd never heard of him before. It was a random live stream of a Baptist church service, and he started talking about, he started referring to his Wednesday night message, where he said, he preached about it. He said, do you know there's battles that are being fought in space? That is what he said. I'm going to go listen to that message. I got to hear this. He was talking about how, the different heavens. You got the sky as one heaven. You've got the second heaven that's outer space. You got the third heaven. And Satan is the prince and power of the air. And there's battles going on. You know what he's probably going to do? He's probably going to that particular Ruckmanite's probably going to incorporate Star Wars into the Bible. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That was in the gap theory, or the gap fact. He talked about, he mentioned the gap theory in that message too. Probably believes in it. Probably believes that there's Darth Vader and lightsabers and all those things back then, Where do you got, listen folks, we're not smart enough to come up with cool things like that. With lightsabers and Wookiees and all that. Where do you think that came from? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you where they got these. I'll tell you where George Lucas got that from. He got it from demons who were around back then. And truth is, Star Wars is historical fact. I don't know. I can't wait to listen to that message. But you know what? Nothing surprises me today. And you know what? The same guy who was preaching that, he was preaching on prophecy and end times, and he's pre-trib, and he's pro-Jew. And you know what? That guy, he can get away with preaching Star Wars in church. And it's okay as long as he's doing it to help teach the pre-trib doctrine. That's how messed up things are in church today. These guys are false prophets making merchandise of people. And you know what? It makes me sick. And people need to stop letting guys like that take advantage of them. It is as wicked as all get out. And listen, if they had half things back then, they'd be around today too. And Sluter taught in his one video that they're going to do it again in the end times. That's the way he interprets the seed of man mingling with the seed from Daniel. I forgot what it said exactly. I'm thinking, you are so dumb. But there's a market for it. People like it. And you know what? If I was looking for popularity, I'd get up and I'd preach on Lord of the Rings and, Star Wars and Captain America, and people like it better. Probably more popular, but it's garbage. I'm not here to make merchandise of people. So anyway, I hope that was a help to you and hope you answer. Next time somebody tells you cave painting is true, so I'm going to go make a drawing on the wall of my house of a time machine. And 100 years, 1,000 years from now, that will prove we had time machines back in this time. That's the kind of reasoning these people are using, and it's foolish. So let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for your word and just the light that it brings, Lord. And I pray you'll help us to make sure we don't get caught up in all this crazy fantasy that the world is obsessed with. I pray you'll help us to expose these false prophets that are making merchandise out of people, just taking advantage of the simple with all this stuff. And I pray you'll help us just focus on that which is true and godly in your word. In your name we pray. Amen. Let's go.